my name is Jade, and you're watching Potato Salad Radio.
It's affected you very personally. Can you speak to that a little bit about how it's hit your home and how it's hit your life?
Yeah, I think.
I mean, you work in music. What's it have to do with?
It's a great place.
What's
to
it
start.
have to do with film?
Yeah, it's timely because last DCMAs is when the budget came down, and I remember sitting at the table with the executive director of Music Nova Scotia and the manager, and I think the Stanfields were sitting around. And I remember
they were just there.
It's just everybody's always hanging around, and then so just getting text messages from my husband, who's a filmmaker, was on the board of Screen Nova Scotia, still is and so at the time they had just gotten out of the budget lockup, and the news hadn't really sunk in or had hit the media yet, but they knew the details were awful for the film industry, and so we were getting texts about what was happening. And not only did we hear about the film tax credit essentially being axed, but we heard about, the film and creative industries, which was sort of an arm's length body that managed the money and the promotion of film and the creative industries being completely canned, like it did not exist anymore. And this was the body that was giving us, Music Nova Scotia, the funds that I delivered. I was the export development officer, so I was suddenly like, well, shit, I don't know if I have a job anymore.
Right.
And we don't know what that looks like. We don't know where the money's coming from. We don't know how it's going to affect us. And so as it rolled out, it was like we really understood that a lot was up in the air. It's still up in the air.
Not to go back and open old wounds too much, but had you had any consultation on the fact that this was coming? Was this the first you'd heard of it?
Oh, yeah. It was...
So it wasn't a discussion hey, guys, what are you doing?
No.
We're looking at, cutting back a bit. How do we make it work? It was none of that kind of collaboration or anything.
Nothing. And that was the biggest hurt, I think, because, Screen Nova Scotia existed in a lot of ways to deal with the fact that the film tax credit had issues, and the government didn't like dealing with it, and so there wasn't open dialogue at the time. There was sort of discussions that were trying to take place, but there was also a promise in the Liberal platform that this would exist, and the way it had been set up. So there was not this feeling of we're doing great, this is awesome, keep it as is. There was a feeling of let's work with something. New, but it has to work within the global context because that's how the film industry works. The film tax credit is something that exists in almost every film-making market in the world. It is the tool that people use to attract money. And it's, really how over 30 years that industry had built up to the point where there was a domestic market making its own money in and of itself. And really sparking off young filmmakers. The Emerging Lens Film Festival just finished, that sort of thing didn't exist before. All of those, that ability for people who were working in the industry on the big productions and starting to come down and teach other people, do smaller productions, tell the stories of people here, that didn't happen unless we had this tool. So the reverberations of what happened was huge because it is Nova Scotian. Everybody knows a guy who's in this something, or there's a connection, or you go to a hardware store and you buy product from them to do a show. There's all these things that were connected, and the music industry is incredibly connected because a lot of times music was used in these local films. Tons of musicians work in the film industry. Mike O'Neill is one of the, I think he was a sound guy for most of it. I could name off a ton of people who work in the music industry as well as the film. So it was definitely not only a financial and economic blow, but it was a morale blow because we felt blindsided.
Yeah, and you were,
and we were, and so in a lot of ways it was sort of okay, do we work to try to fight to get it back? And there was a lot of discussions. They put this new thing in place. It's not really working.
No.
There's still a lot of backdoor conversations, but the trust is really difficult right now.
Why would there be any trust? I mean, you can't promise something, not do it, literally go the other direction, expect me to believe you're ever going to bargain in good faith.
Yeah, it's tricky.